Hi, so welcome to my new video series. This is going to be a video series on making a laminated, traditional styled jointer plane. The lamination method used in this video series is going to be different to my jack plane video. In the jack plane video series I did a Krenov style kind of lamination using 3 pieces for the body. This time I'm going to be using a more traditional styled lamination method using 2 pieces for the body. So you'll just sandwich the blade between these 2 halves. This provides for a stronger body because the wedge won't be working against the glue joints, the 2 side glue joints, so you won't get any warping. With modern glues it's probably not much of an issue, but it's not much harder to make a plane using this kind of method, so why not? So the things you need, first off you need a blade. The blade is your central kind of piece of your plane. It's the most important piece, and you'll need to get that first because you'll need the measurements from that to determine your body stock dimensions. Blades, you have a variety of choices. There's homemade and there's commercial. So the homemade ones you can, just buy a block of, or a blade blank, like O1 steel, W1 steel, but only the simpler steels, because the more complex steels like A2 and possibly D2 and M2, they are, well, they'll require a lot more complex procedures to heat treat properly. So you're stuck with mainly O1, W1 type kind of simple carbon steels. Now they make a good blade, but with a blade the size that you'll be using in a jointer, it might be quite difficult to heat treat effectively. You'll need more than a simple propane torch to heat something of that size to the proper temperatures, and evenly as well. So you'll need to build some kind of furnace using fire bricks or whatever. There's all sorts of tutorials on the internet that show you how to do it. But it's worth a go because it's cheap and you're likely to get a usable blade out of it. But it's not going to be an optimal blade, but it will work. So I'm going to be turning to the commercial blades, and in the commercial blades you have a few choices there too. First off, you can choose laminated or full tool steel. The full tool steel blades are way more common than the laminated ones, and you can buy them all over the place. V-Valley Tools, Hock Blades, all sorts of plane makers also sell them. I think like Philly Planes, they sell custom blades. Ron Brees, he sells a few plain blades, but you can get them all over the place. They're usually O1 or A2 tool steel, and they'll produce a good blade, and they'll work. But I don't like O1 or A2 in a full tool steel blade. They are harder to sharpen. Using the stones that I use natural Japanese waterstones, and I just feel they don't sharpen as well as a laminated blade, but I just don't like how they feel basically, and the edge that they produce, although it's good initially, I don't think they last as well as a Japanese style laminated plane iron. So I chose a laminated iron, and in the laminated irons you have a few choices. If you buy new, I think Galoot Tools are the only place that sells new laminated irons, although they use different materials to the Japanese. They, I think, are produced in China or somewhere, but they use a standard tool steel for the blade, whereas the Japanese, they use their white steel, blue steels, etc. And I don't like the standard tool steels, like I said, because of the blade holding characteristics. I'm sure they work fine, but so, I went for the Japanese style. Incidentally, there are also vintage blades. They are laminated, well, most of them are laminated, but they require a lot of work. I'll show you later a few close-ups of different blade options, but I went, as I said, for Japanese style blades. Now, if you've seen a Japanese style blade, they're like this long, they're tiny in length, but they're extremely thick, and they have really nice steel for the blade edge. So I custom ordered one from a Japanese plane maker, and that's the blade I'll be using. So I'll give you a quick close-up of a few blades that you could choose. So you have a few blade choices here. So the first choice is your standard 01 solid tool steel blade. This is from Ron Brees, and this is the one I use in my jack plane. These types of blade can be had all over the internet. Lee Valley Tools sells some. Obviously Ron Brees, where I got this from, and Hawk Tools, Philly Planes, like all sorts of places sell basically solid, either 01 or A2 tool steel blades. They're good because they're nice, averagely priced. They come nice and machined, nice and flat, and basically ready to use with a light hone. But as I said, I don't really like solid tool steel blades. But this is a good choice for just your average guy. These will produce a fine plane. Now my personal second choice though would be a vintage iron. This is a vintage iron from eBay, new old stock, laminated. You probably can't see the lamination, but up to about here there's a lamination of very nice tool steel. It's very hard, durable, and it produces a great edge. The only problem with this is that you can see it's quite rough, nowhere near flat, so this will need a lot of work to get to proper use. So this bed area here needs to be flattened. The blade edge here, the bevel, needs to be reground, honed, has to be made square to the edges, and this back end here will have to be flattened and polished. But these are cheap, and if you can be bothered to put that work into it to make it usable, these are a great option because they have a really nice steel edge. My first choice though is this Japanese style plane. I got this custom made for me by a Japanese plane maker, and you can see it's quite substantial. Thicker than the Brees and a bit bigger. Makes the Brees look small, although the Brees is actually quite hefty. This is a 60mm by 210mm by 8mm thickness here, tapering down to 7.5mm thickness here. So it uses the Japanese style tapering. Again, laminated. The tool steel edge here is the Blue 2 steel. This backing kind of area here is all rentetsu, or wrought iron, and it's a very nice blade. It's quite expensive, about twice as expensive as the Brees, but I thought for this kind of quality it was worth it for me. So I chose to go here, but any of these blades will produce a great plane. So pick one, depending on your availability or your funds available to you or whatever. But any of these will make a great plane. So decide on one, and then you can go to picking the stock. So once you have your blade, you want some wood for the body and the tote. So the body, you want some hard, straight-grained wood. This is some stuff called Japanese hornbeam. This is quite hard. I think it's 0.7 or so on the density side, but anything harder than roughly something like soft maple will do. So pick a species and get some wood. So the dimensions you want, the length of your piece is obviously the length of your plane that you want to make. I'm making a 800mm or 80cm long jointer plane, so pretty big, 31.5 inches roughly, or just under. So that's the length of your stock. The height of your plane, so the width of your stock, as it were. This should be, if you're making a jointer plane or something like a bigger plane like that, you want at least 3 inches in height. This is maybe 3.5, probably not quite 4, but it's quite chunky. That will give you a nice chunky body section, a good stable section there. The thickness here, you'll have 2 of these pieces to sandwich together. So one of these pieces will be, the thickness will be half of your plane blade width plus half an inch. So obviously half of your plane blade's width, because obviously you want your blade to fit between these two, and that extra half inch will be for the side wall of your plane, which is equivalent of like the Krenov 2 side pieces. So that's the kind of thickness that you want. You don't want anything too thin because obviously your sidewalls will become too thin, but so err on the thick side if you aren't sure, because you can later just shave that down later. So make sure it's straight grain, stable, and to those dimensions. Oh, incidentally, the grain orientation, traditional planes were made with a flat sawn orientation on the sole. I don't know why they did that, because that's not the stablest, it's not the most stable orientation for wood. So I'm going to be going for a quarter sawn orientation. So looking on the end of the plane, there'll be another piece here. I've got the rings going like this, vertical. Provides for a much more stable plain kind of blank, and also it's harder wearing. Most wood's hard wearing on the quarter sawn face, so I don't know why the old timers used a flat sawn configuration, but there's a reason why pretty much all guitar wood is quarter sawn. It's because it's much more stable and yeah, less likely to warp on you. So I've picked the quarter sawn configuration. It's up to you obviously, but you know, do whatever you want. Next piece of wood you need is your tote. So the thickness is roughly an inch. An inch is like a kind of standard thickness. I like a slightly thicker tote, a chunkier tote, so I'm going for a slightly thicker plain blank here, but 1 inch is a rough guideline. You want something to be, your blank itself to be 6 inches square or so. That's to kind of provide, well, I'm going to be doing a sort of closed tote, so the front will be kind of closed. It's like your standard Bailey style with a sort of extra chunk on the front. It's kind of hard to explain with words, but if you search on the internet then you'll probably find pictures of it. This, the material of this can be anything that's like, you know, relatively durable. I've chosen Japanese cherry, sakura. This is hard, cheap, looks nice, easy to plane mill, so choose just something. Again, the orientation here should be, I think, well, if your board should be flat sawn, but because it'll be in this orientation, you'll get kind of quarter sawnish face there, and you want your grain to be straight or maybe slightly slanted, but you don't want it too kind of crazy, because the tote is obviously, once you shape it, it will become quite thin, and if you're pushing on it with a lot of force it could just snap. So make sure you have a nice piece of wood there without any major knots or anything. The last piece of wood you'll need is for the wedge, and the wedge is just a little piece of wood, maybe 6 inches long or so, 3/4 inch thick, and the width plus a little bit extra of your plain blade. You don't want it to be too thin in regards to width, because you want this to fit in the cavity of your kind of body quite snugly. You don't want it too loose, because it'll just be useless as a wedge, I think. And obviously you don't want it too tight. So, you know, any scrap you have lying around would be good for that. So that's all the materials covered. Next thing we need to do is to mark out the two halves for the kind of cavity in the middle of this plain body, and I'll show you that next.